Welcome to QX Church. I'm Pastor Scott Conway. We're continuing our series on wedding vows. We're talking about cleaving, having, holding, and dollars today. Now, dollars doesn't show up much in the wedding vows other than in richer and poorer. But there's a reason we'll be talking about that today because it is part of pre-marriage counseling. Now, you may notice I'm much more casual today. When I actually do a wedding, you might much more commonly find me in a coat and tie. And yet here I am in kind of a Hawaiian shirt, rather understated Hawaiian shirt, but still a Hawaiian shirt, something casual. And this shirt represents cleaving. Now, why is that? The very first wedding that I ever did, they decided wanting to have an outside island-themed casual affair, and they asked if it would be okay for me to wear a Hawaiian shirt, if that was allowed. Now, of course it's allowed for me, even though normally I would do a coat and a tie. I could also do a tuxedo. You might find me kind of near that level with kind of a coat over something else, like I've been wearing for the previous lessons in this series. But it's not my wedding. I might be officiating it, but it is for the bride and the groom. That I might have my way, that apart from any other instructions, apart from any other discussion, I'm going to wear a coat and tie. But with some discussion, I will have what is my default way, and that without any additional input, this is how I'm going to show up. I'm going to show up in the coat and the tie. If there's colors to the wedding, I will try to show up in colors that work for that combination, so that way the officiant doesn't clash with the couple. And there's certain other things like that that I will typically do. But it's not just my wedding. I am a part of a wedding. So there's my way, and then there's the couple's way, and we create out of that an our way. And that is the essence of cleave. Cleave is my way, your way, our way. That there's you and there's me, and we are going to craft a brand new we. And the we that we craft is going to look different than any other combination and couple before. Now, here's something that gets a little tricky sometimes. There's a good chance the we will craft as husband and wife will also be different than the we that we had before we got married, because now the status is different. Now I'm no longer the boyfriend, I'm going to be the husband. I'm not even the fiancé, I'm going to be the husband. That the lady is no longer the girlfriend, she's going to be the wife. Things are going to be different. What different are they going to be? The vow to forsake and the vow to cleave is based on the concept of leave, cleave, be one flesh. Leaving and cleaving comes from Genesis 2:24. Genesis 2:24 reads, "A man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh." Pardon me. So leave, cleave, be one flesh. What does that mean? The man will leave his father and his mother. Now, typically the way ancient Hebrew law worked is if it was a mandate on the man, it was a mandate on the woman. If it was a mandate on the free man, it was a mandate on the servant. If it was a mandate on someone who wasn't enslaved, there's a mandate on the slave, and so on. And there's kind of this chain. It goes the other way around on rights, where if it was a right to a woman, it's a right to a man. If it's a right to a servant, it's a right to a master. If it's a right to a slave, it's a right to a free person. And so when you look at an instruction to the man, that a man will leave his mother and father, it also means the woman will leave her mother and father. That there's going to be some leaving involved either way. And the two shall come together in some way and cleave. And that's why commonly, because we use the phrase in be one flesh, we will talk about it in sexual terms. But remember, we already talked about having and holding. Having and holding is elsewhere. And the having and the holding is the sexual and the sensual part of the relationship. And we're going to touch on it a little bit more today. And so when we talk about cleaving, we're talking about, okay, in some way there's a leaving. And back in the old days, you would go directly from your family into your marriage. And the two shall become one flesh. They are to be treated as a unit. They are to be treated as though they are a single person. And we have models we use for that even today in modern society. So to leave means I bring only what I choose to bring. I bring only what I choose to bring. Now, is that always going to be possible? Of course not. But that's the goal. Everyone's life has treasure and trash. Everyone's life has good things and bad things. Everyone has good qualities and bad qualities. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. All of us are a mix. What we do in this treasure and trash life, what we do in this kind of treasure and trash totality of a whole person with a whole life, is we try to bring all the treasure that we can bring into our marriage. We try to bring all the treasure that we can bring into this new life, into this new thing that we are creating. And as we built our dating relationship, as we built our courting relationship, as we've gone into our engagement, hopefully we've been doing that the entire time. And as we bring all of our treasure into the relationship to help craft as amazing a thing as we are able to craft. And we want to leave all the trash that we can leave. So if there's problems from our family of origin, if there's bad habits from our family of origin, if there's problems from previous relationships, if there's habits that we built up because we've had some bad breakups or some bad prior relationships, that we leave those behind as we move forward into this new thing. Now, some trash will be carried with us because it's unavoidable. There's some bad things that have happened in the past, and we're stuck with them. Sometimes you can be stuck with a bad prior relationship. Because if you had children together and now you're co-parenting, and now that other person is permanently connected through the child. And that means if I come into a relationship, and I come into a relationship with children from my previous relationship, and through those children, I have to consistently deal with that ex. The challenge that I'm going to have is I can't just leave the ex out. And I have to figure out, okay, how is that going to factor into the way we conduct this relationship? And there can be a lot of idealism in this, of what you want to be able to, the ex isn't relevant, but then what if it turns into a conflict over the child? What if it turns into a conflict with the child? And now the ex is using the child as a weapon, and the child is using the ex as a weapon. What do you do? How are you going to handle that? And there might be the ideals of how you think you're going to handle that, and then there comes the realities of what actually happens if something comes up. And so these things can become challenges, and you can't just decide what things are going to be like, because that's a permanent part. You're coming forward with an illness, coming forward with an injury, coming forward with financial debt, coming forward with anything from the history that you can't just decide it's done. Some stuff you can be working to overcome, some stuff you can be working to adapt to. But if you have two college graduates and both of them have substantial student loans, if they decide, well, we'll get married after all of our debt is paid off, you might never get married. Because I've seen some of these student loans, and I have friends and colleagues that are in their 30s and their 40s and are still working to pay off their student loans. And there's a good chance they will never pay off their student loans. And if they declared, we're not getting married until all that's paid off, then they would never get married. And so these are things you kind of need to be aware of, things you need to think of, because in the Cleave equation, the history you show up with that can't be left behind, the part that carries forward, is going to be part of the marriage. So some trash carried with us because it's unavoidable. We can't just decide, I don't owe student loans anymore. We can't just decide that, I don't have children with anybody else anymore. That these things are part of the objective reality that's going to carry forward. One of the most recent weddings I did, the bride has MS. And so that means that she has a lot of medical problems, and that carries forward. She can't just decide, well, that's it, I'm just going to be healthy for my new partner. Now, she can take care of herself within the context of her condition, but she can't decide she doesn't have the condition anymore. So some trash is carried with us because it's unavoidable. It's bad things that come along with the package, and this is going to be true with all of us. None of us is the perfect catch. None of us has zero bad habits. None of us can do absolutely everything perfectly. None of us is going to be the perfect husband, the perfect wife. And some of that is just going to be unavoidable. It doesn't matter how long you wait. It doesn't matter how long you work. The reality is going to be the reality. Some things we carry forward are neutral. They don't really matter one way or the other. They're not going to help. They're not going to hurt. They're just idiosyncratic to the individual. You know, if I'm moving forward and I like the color blue, you know, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It's neither, really. It's just a preference. You know, you have certain tastes, certain things you may own, certain things you move in with, certain bits of your history, certain skills you have, degrees you have, experiences you've had that neither help nor hurt. They're just there. And then, of course, we bring our treasure. We bring the good things. We bring our great memories. We bring our good habits. We bring our love. We bring our character. We bring our values. We bring our skills. We bring our joyous memories. We bring all of the things that we built together. We walk into a marriage and we know how to do all of the things we know how to do. If we're going to be running a household together, you know, we know how to cook and clean and whatever it is that helps contribute to the household. For earning power, you know, we have employable skills. We have ability to generate income. And for child rearing, you know, we have ways that we think are good ways to raise children, and we walk in with our faith, and we walk in with our values, and we walk in with our love, and we walk in with all of these great things that are going to contribute to the marriage. And those things we bring on purpose. Cleave is I bring my way, you bring your way. We make our way. Now, of the unavoidable trash, of all the neutral parts, and of all the treasure, it will fall into these three broad categories in a new relationship. And those broad categories are that some of it will help the marriage, some of it will hurt the marriage, and a lot of it won't make any difference one way or the other. So I'd say a particular way that I like to organize the kitchen. Is that going to help? Is that going to hurt? Is that going to be neutral? Well, hopefully, it helps just in the sense the kitchen is in some semblance of order. But by and large, that's kind of a neutral thing. Now, if I show up with good cooking skills, that's likely to be a help, because then that means I can cook meals. I can prepare food. Now, what if you have a couple shows up and only one of them knows anything about the kitchen? Then that means one of them has the permanent burden of doing all of the cooking. Well, then the one who shows up with a skill, that's a help. The one that shows up with zero skills, okay, that's a hurt. Because now the burden has shifted 100% to a single individual. And the other person can do very little to help. And so I've never personally seen a case where someone is unable to prepare any food, but say hypothetically that was the case, that means that all of that's been shunted over. And every relationship should look unique. So we get things in the old days, we had, well, that's woman's work, well, that's man's work, that's what the wife is supposed to do, well, that's what the husband's supposed to do. And that works so long as both sides agree on the gender roles. So if you have a woman that says, okay, yes, this is mine, and the husband says, yes, that's yours, and the wife says, okay, and husband, that's yours, and the husband says, absolutely, this is mine, and it covers everything, that's perfect. Everyone gets to organize and structure their relationship the way that they choose. A lot of times when you've had the romance and you haven't lived together, so you haven't ever had to have the division of labor, a lot of times people are pretty oblivious as to what the practicalities of that are going to be, unless you've done the courting process the way that we teach it. If you've done the pre-courting, if you've done the courting, you've had these discussions, you're not going to be surprised. There'll be as little as possible to still navigate. There'll be some of the things that, okay, we've never lived together before, we've never been married to each other before. We have a good idea of all the things we've talked about, of all the things we planned, of all the intentions that we have, but then when we actually put it together, how well do we pull it off, and how close to the agreement can we actually do? Because sometimes you'll agree to something because you really think you can, and you really intend to, and you made a good faith agreement that you were going to do this, and then when you're getting into doing it, it kind of proves to be a bit more challenging than you expected it to be. And that's okay too, and you can work through that. So the B1 flesh, as you do the cleaving, the idea of B1 flesh is that the partnership is a new, unique thing. We are different than you and me. My way plus your way combines to make a brand new, unique our way. And as I mentioned in the first lesson, if we do cleave, and it's my way plus your way to make an our way, and our way sometimes especially looks like it's always my way, then that's a problem. Because that means that we don't have a partnership. What we have is a servitude. And so I have a problem when one person is always getting their way. There was a joke somebody told, and they meant it as a joke, but they were being, frankly, probably a little bit passive-aggressive because they had some resentment around it, and they were using humor as a coping mechanism. And what they basically boiled down to is like, well, there was my way and there was her way, and so we compromised and did it her way. There's what I wanted, there's what she wanted, so we compromised, and we did it how she wanted. There's was my goals and her goals, and so we compromised. Then we pursued her goals. And a lot of times you see that where the husband is kind of the domineering one. Sometimes you see it where the wife is the domineering one. Sometimes you see it where the kids end up being the domineering ones in the household. So you have to take a look and see, okay, on the be one flesh, on the partnership, when you're doing the our way, is it really an our way? Does it really blend both people? Is it really a partnership? And this partnership being a new, unique thing, creating a brand new thing. You're doing that when you get married. We are creating a brand new thing when we get married. It's a partnership recognized by both church and state. A partnership recognized by church and state and officially and legally memorialized to memorialize the commitment that the couple has made. That now they are making a public pledge one to another. Some people will say things like, oh, we don't need a piece of paper, we're committed to each other. It's like, then why not get married? Is there a reason why not? Well, we don't need it. Okay, well, I understand you don't need it. But if you feel like you are truly committed to each other for life, typically what that means legally is a marriage. Typically what that means officially before a church is a marriage. But you're actively choosing, you're deciding, no, we don't want it memorialized. No, we don't want it to have any legal effect. We just want it to be us. Is there a reason why you don't want the legal effect? Is there a reason why you don't want to make it official? Is there a reason why you don't want it officially and legally memorialized if it is truly a commitment at that scale? Especially today. And what I mean by especially today is divorce is so easy. Divorce is a much more involved, much more complicated legal procedure than just breaking up. But a few of the biggest differences between being legally married and not being legally married has to do with the relative rights you have with one another. And so there's the legal authority to do things and make decisions in a partnership and community property and whatever other issues depending upon the jurisdiction that you're in. And you also can't just break up and be done. There's a whole process you have to go through. And so there's a lot of benefits and there's some potential detriments. And that if you do break up after having been married, well, there's a lot of legal implications and ramifications with that too. So is there a reason why you're hiding from that? Is there a reason why you're avoiding that? And are both of you in 100% agreement on that? And so that's part of B1 Flesh. Is this a new, unique thing that you two are officially building, that there's a reason you've decided we do not want to be married? And to be honest, there might be, but you might not feel safe talking about it. Because you might think, well, I like the way it is. I'm afraid if we get married, it's not going to be this good. That's a big one. I like the way it is, but I also want to know that if I need to get out, I can get out. So that if there's a problem in the future, I want to know that I can just walk away. I want to know that the law is not going to dictate what that has to look like. And for some people, that's going to be the case. Some people have other practical reasons, and whatever they are. I mean, grown-ups get to make their own decisions, and so I'm not going to argue with people and tell people what they have to think, and tell people what they have to do, and tell people the choices they must make. But there's still things to think about. It's a partnership, and every partnership is unique. My partnership with one person will be different than my partnership with another person. My friendship with one person will be different than my friendship with another person. My business work with one individual will be different than my business work with another individual. As the two become one, each partnership is a new entity. And so that's one of the things that you're looking at as you're creating the thing. Now, we have a model that we have in business partnerships. Business partnerships are different than prior business partnerships. That you're creating this new entity. And so we're going to use that model as we talk about kind of a co-ownership sort of situation. As the two become one, each partnership being a new entity, you and me become we. You and me become we. We are a new thing. You and me become we, but I'm still me. You're still you. And together we bring ourselves to this new team. Together we bring ourselves to this new we, this new us. But that doesn't mean I stop being me. That doesn't mean you stop being you. In fact, you should still be you, because if you're not still being you, then I'm losing part of my team. And if I'm not still being me, you're losing part of your team. We have a team. I'm not on your team. You're not on my team. We are on our team. That there's a mutuality to it. We have a new team. We have a new family. We have a new household. We have a new entity as we become one. We think in terms of the partnership. What that means is that when something comes up, it's not just about me. That I think of myself, yes, I should still think of myself, but I think of the context of the partnership. The partnership is foremost in my mind. And so I no longer think of just myself, I think of the partnership first. I still do think of myself as an individual, but I think of myself as an individual in the context of the partnership. That partnership context is critical. Now there's this kind of ideology going around these days, and it's like, well, I could do whatever I want. I'm a grown-up. I don't answer to anybody. I don't need anybody's permission to do anything. And that may be true. And that if someone is constantly, seriously, honestly needing permission, I mean, when I say something like, oh, is it okay if I go out tonight? It's not that I need someone's permission to go out tonight. It's not like if, they control the entire schedule and they get to dictate yes, no, maybe, okay, well, if you go out, you can leave at 8:30, you better be back by 10, and that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is because we are partners, there's a partnership deal here, and I want to make sure that there's not some partnership thing going on, that there's not some partnership need going on, that my absence is going to do harm to, and that I can move forward with my plans as an individual without doing any damage to the partnership. And we have metaphors for this all over. So if you think about it in terms of a sports team, that if I decide if I'm a player on the team, I know what play got called, but I really don't care. The one I feel like doing is this instead. Well, yeah, I know that we're supposed to be driving in that direction to work on our touch, but that the sun's going that way. So how about we go in the other direction instead? Why? Because I feel like it. That's not the way that works. The players think in terms of what role do you play on this team. The players think in terms of what play are we running. What is the team goal? And you operate as a member of the team. Now, are you still who you are? Of course you are. Are you still an individual? Of course you are. But how much of you is on this team? And if you're in the middle of the game, how much of you is here playing this game? All of you is on this team. All of you is playing this game. All of you is in this moment right here pursuing that goal right now. And so in a marriage partnership, if we can do this in a football game, of course we should do it in a marriage partnership. If we can do this in business, if you got two people working a business and one of you is mostly the behind-the-scenes person, does the accounting, runs the money, knows what the budget is, the other one's kind of the salesperson, the visionary, the people person, it would be a good idea if the people person talked to the numbers person to make sure that the numbers are going to support what the people person's doing. It might be a good idea if the numbers person talked to the people person to make sure that a numbers-based decision isn't going to destroy the people relationships. They're supposed to work together. And if the money person goes to the people person and says, okay, things are going to be a little tight. I was thinking of cutting here, here, and here, and here. Will that be okay? And the people says, are you kidding? We will lose this client if you do that. We will lose that employee if you do that. We can't do that. We have to protect that. Is there any place else we can? And they work together on the partnership. Not that equal partners have to have one another's permission, but they better be working together. They better be checking with each other, or it's not a partnership. And so when we're doing the thinking of myself, I think of myself in 100% context with the partnership, with the family, with the household. Because I am a member of this house. I may think of myself as, well, I'm the man of the house, I'm the leader of the... I should still be checking in with my wife, not dictating to her what's going on, not relegating her to the position of servant or slave, but as a partner. And so I'm not going to head off and go do something without checking in with her first to make sure that the partnership doesn't have a need. Because what if both of us did that? What if both of us, we have a kid, and the kid's at home, and I figured, well, my wife can take care of the kid, I'm heading off. And so I'm deciding that she's going to be at home with the child alone because I've decided that I'm heading out, and I just inform her. Well, what if she does the same thing? Well, she's decided that I'm staying home to take care of the kid while she's heading out, and we both decided, and now no one's taking care of the kid because no one's at home, and we just sort of figured the other one would be. Obviously, that would be a problem. So we don't do stuff like that. That's not how partnerships operate. Partnerships operate with a mutuality of respect, with a mutuality of leadership, with a mutuality of responsibility. And as we do the leave, cleave, we're leaving behind the trash that was then. This is now. We leave the then behind. We carry forward what we choose to carry forward. Whatever is past is past. That was then. This is now. The husband and wife are making a new thing. The partnership they are building is a thing unto itself. Those business partnerships serve as a model. And so a lot of times we still seem to occasionally have a challenge with people thinking that, well, I get to call the shots now. I get to say. And it seems to be in religious communities in particular, the man thinks that because he's the man of the house, that it's all about him. And he gets to do for her whatever he feels like doing for her, and she gets to do for him whatever he feels like she gets to do for him. And the business partnership model, the sports analogy on that really helps us understand that that's not the way partnerships work. The business belongs to both. The family belongs to both. The partnership belongs to both. It's like you're co-owners. It's not owner and employee, it's two owners. They work together as partners because each brings something to the partnership. That's why you decided to partner. And if you just remember that basic idea, we are partners, not opponents. This is the essence of Cleave. Just be partners. Be partners. That solves most problems. It seems like 4 out of 5 times I'm helping a couple navigate issues. It's this one principle of we are partners, not opponents. And they're behaving like opponents. They're behaving like rivals. They're behaving like competitors. There's winning and losing instead of win-win. There's my way or the highway instead of my way and your way and our way. And they're not looking to create an our way. They're looking to have one person comply with the my way. And they're losing the partnership. So you get this one principle. We are partners. And we are making a marriage. That can handle 4 out of 5 of the situations you're likely to encounter. Because you want to know a fairly simple test you can use to determine if a couple has marriage problems? I found this to be true, and it seems to be, as far as I've seen so far, 100% predictive. 100%. You can tell if a couple is having marriage problems based on this one thing. They're married. They're married. If you're married, you will have problems. The extent to which you feel the problems, the extent to which the problems tear at the relationship, the extent to which the problems do harm to the marriage, is largely determined by how well you show up as partners or how much you show up as opponents. The couples that show up as partners, they find that they navigate the problems with such ease they're barely even aware they had the problem. Because they see the problem, they go to the problem, they go through the problem, basically defining the problem, and that's the level of their experience. We experience a problem enough to define it, so we have some understanding, so we know what solution to do. And they're constantly they solve the problem so easily. It's like, what's 2 plus 2? It's 4. How much are you going to feel that math problem? You know the answer, and you just do it. And the more you show up as partners, the more casually and easily you navigate your marriage problems. The problems that occur when you're married. The problems you encounter as a couple. The problems that life just throws up. Because you do it as partners, not as opponents. And it may be the partnership struggling against some outside issue, but the partnership doesn't struggle with it itself. Having and holding. So, that's enough on leave, cleave, be one flesh, you get that. But because a lot of people think of that in terms of sex, we're going to mention the having and holding. The having is the sex. The sex and the sexuality, the sensuality, and the romance is all part of having and holding. You can think of the holding part, that's the hugs and the kisses and the affection and the snuggles and the cuddles. That's the romance and the dating and the hand holding and the arms around each other, the sitting next to each other, the dancing with each other. And the having part is the sex, the sexuality, all the things that go into your more intimate physical relationship. These things should be discussed at length. And it's a big topic, it really is. And I've done an entire program just focused on awesome sex. And I've done another entire program called The Talk, which is basically the fundamentals on sex and issues related to sex. I've done another program on masculine sexuality, just unpacking the whole thing that we typically see on the male side about sexuality. And so whether it's a man trying to get a better handle on all that for himself, because typically masculine sexuality kind of comes up in this odd vacuum that it's not something we usually discuss. And for a lot of women that don't understand male sexuality, it's really helpful to understand all that. And you start to stack all these things up, and it's like 30, 35 hours of material touching on a whole bunch of stuff that sometimes we have very passionate opinions about, but not really as many informed opinions about. That we have intense judgment over, but sometimes very little understanding of. And so all of that's in all of those. And so how much am I going to cover in 5 or 10 minutes within a single lesson in a single poem? Certainly not all of it. In fact, not even much of a slice of it. More, it's just to mention this is a big subject and it really ought to be discussed. Now, if you do pre-marriage counseling with me, I will have an open and very frank and sometimes blunt conversation about this topic with you. And I want it discussed. I want to be able to ask her about him and him about her and about what they've talked about and what they've agreed to and what they're looking at and what they're studying and what their references are and all of these things, so that way I have a grasp on whether or not that this critical thing, that's one of the top 2 areas that people have explosions about, that tears apart and even blows up relationships, that it's at least been discussed, that it's at least something that they can talk about. So things related to sex and romance are in the top 2 issues that plague marriages. In the top 2. And yet very often it's something that can't be talked about between many couples. And if it's one of the top 2 bombs in the things that blows up relationships, it better be something that gets discussed. The sexual aspect of the relationship is one of the defining characteristics of marriage, along with things like blending finances. We're going to get to the finances. So say if I have a sister and the sister has children and I'm living with my sister and I'm helping out financially, I'm the primary breadwinner of the house so that she can stay home and she can raise my nephews and nieces. And we might even be sharing a bedroom because we have just enough space for us, and in that case we'll likely have the twin beds and she'll have her bed. And what will be missing is the sexual aspects of the relationship. But we could have blended finances as a brother and sister. We could have a shared household as brother and sister. We could do this as friends. I mean, think about how far that could go. What is one of the biggest things that's different between a husband and a wife and a brother and sister that are living together to help raise one of their kids. It's going to a lot of times boil down to financial control. He who makes the money is going to have the control over the money typically, and the sexual relationship. And when you begin to look at it that way, you say, okay, this is going to be a vital part of this. What is this going to look like for you? What is this going to look like for this couple? And it can be a difficult thing to discuss for many people. And when issues arise, if you wait until issues arise, if you wait until it's a problem, it is almost impossible to discuss. But if things like pornography are talked about beforehand, you can talk about it beforehand. If things like pornography are talked about after it's become an issue in the marriage, that is an almost impossible discussion to have on a rational basis. Because then all the emotion is packed into it, judgment is packed into it, condemnation is packed into it. If you wait until there's a sexual problem in the marriage, it's almost impossible to discuss that. And I've seen discussions where, in this particular case, it was the husband who wanted to have sex with his wife. Not terribly uncommon. And the wife that she didn't feel like it. She had no desire, and she thought, well, that meant that he's not supposed to want to have sex with me because I don't want to have sex with him. And anytime he tried to talk about it, then she would fly off the handle. You think there's something wrong? You think I'm a terrible wife? You want to divorce me? And they couldn't have the discussion. And so if you wait until there's a problem, that gets tough. And it's not that there's anything wrong with someone, although of course it's obviously possible there may be. The big thing there is that once the emotion gets involved, once it's that emotional a problem, it is almost impossible to have a discussion without having some outside person, an outside professional, an outside person with some wisdom and some rapport with the people on the subject to guide the discussion. It's almost impossible to have that direct discussion. So these are things that you want to talk about. Well, I more frequently hear from men who are privately furious about their sexual relationship with their wives. I also hear women who feel romantically and sexually abandoned. And it gets to be a challenge sometimes. And part of the challenge is without the ability to have open communication by the time, like I said, it's a problem, it's emotional and it's hard to discuss. Where I've talked to a wife one time, and she felt like she kept initiating with her husband. That, she understood that, she kind of like put him off and then he had eased off on his initiating, and so she started to initiate. Well, then I talked to the husband. He had no clue she was initiating anything. So whatever it was she was doing to him, it was subtle enough that he had no idea. Now, part of what I'm guessing it might have been in that particular case is that he kind of had an approach that a hug is a hug, a kiss is a kiss. You express your love with a hug, you express your love. Basically a lot of the stuff that I teach. And she had grown up where hugs and kisses were like a path to stuff. And so she knew that, well, if I kiss the guy in this way, then, of course we're having sex, because any guy who kisses any woman this way, it's obviously, he's racing off to the bedroom, and that's what this means. But to him, that means that's a really nice kiss. And so for him, he thinks like, well, that's nice that I'm getting hugs, and that's nice that I'm getting kisses, but she seems disinterested in sex. And while it was true she was disinterested, to her, that was taking the initiative. To her, going that far was the invitation. While to him, when he goes that far with her, that's not a request. That's, I love you with a hug, I love you with a kiss. And so you go, okay, so now you begin to see the mismatch in communication. She thinks she's saying one thing, the message he's receiving is very different, which you might have been able to guess based upon what was going on and not going on. So she was thinking he's not interested in her, while he was thinking she wasn't really interested in him because of the previous turn downs, and he would every once in a while make an overture and very commonly get put off, and so he stopped making the overtures. And then she would make the overture, but what to her was an overture wasn't being received as such. And so these are things sometimes you need to have discussions with, because I've had the discussions with men who are hurt and furious over their relationship. And what typically happens is, well, if this is going to be a really big sore spot, there is a fairly reasonable chance he might really crave feeling desired by somebody. And that puts someone in a very vulnerable place for an affair. And if that's not something you want in your life, you want to not leave that out there. For a lot of women, much more commonly than being just physically abandoned, although that's been an issue too. If they're craving affection, if they're craving romantic attention, if they're craving being cherished, and for them part of this physical relationship is part of that, and they also feel abandoned, that puts her in a vulnerable place. And very often when you have partnership, they want to work together on this, but sometimes when you have not so much partnership, you're on my team, we are not on our team, I expect you to just live with it. And I want you to be happy, but I want you to be happy not having what I don't want to give you. So talk about it. It's a huge topic, and it's well worth studying. Come to some kind of defined understanding on the having and the holding issues, whatever it is. And my recommendation is study the issue. And just on the stuff that I teach, I mean, you could spend, if you have a typical commute and you're in your car for an hour and you're just listening to the audios there, you could spend a month easily going through the material and just hearing it for the first time. I had one wife in particular, she wanted to get the masculine sexuality stuff. And she says that first she was ticked off. She was really angry about it. And she was really angry because part of it she was thinking, well, that's not what men should be like. That's not what it should be like. Well, it's because she was looking at it from a very stereotypically feminine sexuality. And then the more she asked her husband, and it became a conversation prompt. Says, men don't really do this, do they? And he's, well, actually, yeah, they do you? Well, that's harder for a man to admit, but you can have the generic conversation, and there's a pretty good chance that at least 80%, and maybe 90, 95, 100% of the generic conversation may apply. But don't come at it with an accusing tone, because the more accusing you are, the more judgmental you are, the more condemning you are. Well, my way is the right way. My way is the good way. This is just bad. This is sick. This is disgusting. That destroys communication. And so you want to be able to open communication. Now, related to all of this is dollars and cents. Okay, what does sex have to do with money? I mean, we're not talking prostitution here. Well, it's because dollars and cents, and dollars making sense, not cents as in pennies, but cents as in common sense, logical sense. This making sense out of dollar issues is the other one. Money and sex are the top two ticking time bombs in a lot of relationships. That if you want to see rip-roaring fights, a lot of times the rip-roaring fights you'll see will be over money. Now, sometimes it's not even really about money. Sometimes it's about the sex. Sometimes it's about other stuff. But this is where they feel safe fighting, and so they end up fighting over here. But these two core issues are two of the top time bombs that for years they would do surveys, and they found that by and large these top two categories were drivers in ending marriages. The marriages would come crashing to an end, and the subject was in some way related to sex or in some way related to money. Now, which one was number one and which one was number two would sometimes flip. But that means that these are things you want to have covered. Finances should be discussed at length. However you choose to organize your finances is up to you. One of the things that I see and that I like and that I tend to encourage is that there should be the our money, and then there should be his money and her money. Now, what I mean by that is that he knows how much money he has that he can just spend, and it's just his. And he doesn't have to check. He doesn't have to make sure we don't need this money for some other bill, and the other way around. And some of this came up actually from my parents, where they would each check the bank account and see how much money they have, and then they would just, oh, okay, well, we have this much money. And so he would go to the ATM to get cash out. She would go to the store to go spend some money. What they found is they were spending the exact same money. And because they needed to pay the household bills, and it was all in one account, is they ran into some problems. And so the simple solution was, okay, well, let's divide it up. The household bill money goes in the household account. Neither one of us touches that. That's the money for the household bills. That's going to pay the rent. That's going to pay the phone. That's going to pay the power. That's going to pay, all these other things that are part of the household bills. Then we take the rest of the money and we divide it up. So you have this much money. You can go out to lunch. You can pop into Starbucks. You can go to the store. You can go out shopping for clothes. And you don't need to check because no one else is spending that money but you. And so that's a way to organize. Some people organize it all just goes into one account. Some people organize that only one person does all of the money. That either the husband or the wife pays all of the bills and controls all of the cash. I've seen relationships where, okay, this is the bill money, and for our dating money, social life money, renting around money, we have X amount of dollars, and that's going to be in cash. And in one particular couple, for a while, he had that, and she would always ask, is this okay? And then he would always say yes, and then gave her the money. And say, okay, you will be in control of the family cash, and then you don't need to ask. You can decide. You know how much money we have. I trust you. I know you're not going to be wasting the money, and then that's all the money we have. So, I know you're not going to overspend it because we have it in cash. They're not using credit. And if from time to time there'd be like a windfall or some kind of a bonus, that would go what they call off budget. And so they know, okay, we have $300 a month for our relationship life, for going out to dinner, for going to movies and stuff. And every once in a while there'd be like a bonus, some off-budget bonus. Someone gave them a gift card. Someone gave them movie passes, something like that, where that doesn't have to tap into that. That it can, but it doesn't have to. Where it could be, well, we have movie passes. Oh, so we can go to any movie we want. Well, if there's a movie coming up they may want to see, they might decide we're going to save those passes. However they do it. And that's how they organize it. So there's all kinds of ways to do it. And however you choose to organize your finances, that should be a mutual decision for the couple. Whatever priority you put on finances is also up to you. For some people, lifestyle is important. For some people, they want to express it as a matter of safety. I want to live in a safe neighborhood. Well, safe neighborhoods tend to be more expensive than the least expensive neighborhoods. And if you want to have more privacy, well, that's usually going to be like a standalone building, which is going to be typically like a house rather than an apartment that's going to have sometimes upstairs neighbors, downstairs neighbors, left wall neighbors, right wall neighbors, back wall neighbors, where whatever's going on in any of those structures, noise-wise, is affecting you, and whatever's going on in the complex might be affecting you. I've lived in a complex where, kind of down the hall and to the left, there was this one couple that would fight with such consistency that you would hear the yelling and the screaming and occasionally something being thrown, and the police might show up once every few months because yet another fight bubbled over at a level. And would it be completely reasonable for people to say, well, I want to try to live someplace where this isn't a normal part of our life? Yeah. Now, one of the things, when you're talking about priority of finances, stereotypically, and I find actually typically, finances are more important to the woman, and stereotypically, sex is more important to the man. And these are the two topics that need to be discussed at length. One of the problems with being a man, and one of the problems with being a woman, and let's suppose that the stereotypical split on this is the case, is the one who wants the sex from the other person. He's the one who has to keep bringing it up. That's going to be tough. Likewise, if, say, it's stereotypically the woman who has more of a financial desire, if she's the one who wants from him to do something that's going to provide income, it's harder for her to bring that up. So basically, the one who wants and wants to operate as a partner, when you feel like you're coming to someone and you're basically wanting them to do something different, that can be a tough discussion because that can often lead to conflict and lead to fights. And so it's helpful if you have a more typical split, that the one from whom more might be expected should be the one to bring it up. Now, typically, if you want to know the level of financial material support the average woman emotionally desires in a typical healthy woman, it's whatever she grew up with. The lifestyle level that she grew up with. The lifestyle level that her father and her mother provided for her when she was a girl. That's typical. Less than that feels like lack. Now, she may love her husband and be perfectly okay with that. But this desire for something more may linger there, not will, but may. And so it's helpful to keep that in mind. And sometimes a couple that's in love feels like, well, our love is what's important, not the money, not the neighborhood we live in, not whether we have a studio apartment or a house, not whether we have a nice car or we're using mass transit. This doesn't matter so long as we're together. And sometimes that's easy to do and to believe that money doesn't matter until you get past the honeymoon stage, and it's the practicalities of life. And then people tend to default on those expectations that reflect the life that they grew up with. So this is one of the top 2 discussion topics when I do pre-marriage counseling, because it's one of the top 2 issues that arise in marriage. And that's why objective agreements that both can define are helpful. Money is math. It's math. It's accounting. It's a balance sheet. Household finances work on a balance sheet. There's income, there's outgo. You have so much money coming in, you have so much money going out. It ought to be pretty logical. It ought to be pretty straightforward. It ought to be, but it isn't. When dollars are a matter of math, the priorities are still a matter of agreement. So the balance sheet's the balance sheet. That's the math part. But what do you do when you're not sure about where to put the money? What do you do about where you have choices? What do you do when you have choices in income? What do you do when you have choices in outgo? Then it's a matter of agreement and power struggles. Where there's agreement, all is well. If both sides agree, all is well. And agreement may often, unfortunately, look like it's one person decides, the other one just capitulates whether they like it or not. And they'll even say they agree because they feel like they really don't have a choice and they really don't want to fight about it. But financial priorities can be a power struggle. Where there's disagreement, power struggles often ensue when the couple can't agree, yes, this is where the money needs to go. The balance sheet is a matter of math, but where the money goes after the mandatory bills are paid. What you're willing to do to bring in more money, these are choices. And it's a mattership, a partnership priority. If the partners disagree about these priorities, conflict often ensues. Sometimes it's overt conflict that they actually fight about it. There's actually engagement, one with the other, fighting for their respective priorities. Sometimes it's covert. And I've seen a lot of covert things where, there was one particular case where the man was the breadwinner and the mother was a stay-at-home mom and taking care of the kids. And her whole thing is, I'm not wasting the money. Well, his argument was, I'm not saying you're wasting the money. I'm saying you're using up more money than we have. And we're getting in deeper and deeper and deeper, and I need you to spend less money. Well, she felt, if I'm spending it on good stuff, I should be able to spend whatever I spend. And his view was, we have X number of dollars, the budget can't be X plus Y. Because we're getting deeper and deeper in debt, and we're running up our credit cards, and we can't keep up with this. And so there was an imposed agreement that, okay, this is all we've got. You can't spend money to these people or that people. Obviously, you can go grocery shopping, and then all of a sudden the grocery bill jumped up. And what she was doing was she was getting cash back at the grocery store every single time because she wanted to do the stuff she thought was good for the kids. And so it ended up not solving the problem, and then that kind of flew under the radar for a while until he went back and he was looking at the bank statements and realized as soon as they got to the place where, okay, look, this has to be the budget, this is all the money we have, that all of a sudden the monthly grocery bill had a $600 a month jump at the grocery store. And that the frequency of the grocery store runs went from every other week to every week. And that's part of why you didn't notice, is because the transaction dollars stayed pretty close to the same, but how many there were, because she was going grocery shopping every week, buying less groceries and getting cash back. Less groceries, cash back. And that was a power struggle. And the balance sheet said you have this many dollars coming in, you have that many dollars going out, and they had a net negative every single month. And they were having constant conflict over it. And it was covert for a while. Once it was revealed, now it's an overt fight. it's better if you can try to figure these things out. This is a great opportunity when stuff like this happens to dig beneath the surface and find out what's really going on. Why is this a struggle? And so much of it boiled down to, she thought she wanted to do what she wanted to do with the kids. And he wanted to make the money he wanted to make and didn't want to have to work the overtime. And he wanted to work the profession he worked, and he was fine with the work he was doing, and he wanted her to figure out how to make the money work, and she was fine staying home with the kids and didn't want to go get work to supplement the income because she was at home taking care of the kids. And something was going to break, and they had to figure it out. So something as objective as a balance sheet is a good prompt. It's a good place to start. And to take a look at it and figure it out. And when I had this couple sitting in my office, and her whole argument was, I'm not wasting the money. And getting her to understand, it's like, but we're not talking about waste. We're talking about the balance sheet right now. It's like, we'll get to that part. But right now we're talking the balance sheet. We're looking at the math. And it was hard because you could tell it was already an emotional topic. And unfortunately, sometimes by the time someone comes to the counselor, it's already an emotional topic. But once we got past the emotion and we're looking at the dollars and the cents, then we could start talking about, okay, so now what do we do to bridge this? Because obviously either the income has to go up, the outgo has to go down, something has to happen to repair this imbalance. And then that's when, as we got behind the math, that we got to where a lot of the issues were. And kind of the corner she was backing him into, that she really thought, well, he needs to do this. And she just figured, well, if she just spends some money, that'll force him. And in his part, that's what he realized was going on, is, okay, so she's trying to force me to do that by spending the money on the kids. And when it's, okay, so that's been a topic of discussion, and she had requested it, and he had declined, and so she figured, well, she's going to force it now. And that's a power dynamic. That's a power struggle. She wanted things a certain way, and she was going to put him in a situation where he had to do it her way. And that he wanted things a certain way, and he was battling with his wife on not wanting to do what he didn't want to do. And once we realized, so basically what we have going on is a power struggle. And now we can deal with it as a power struggle. So instead of the fight being over the money, now we can have a discussion over the priorities as we dig behind it. But this is also part of why you want to have the discussion about money. This is part of why it needs to be a top topic of discussion. And you have to be careful about the agreements being made, because again, that in-love feeling at times, or someone's just feeling trapped, will block people into this corner where they feel like they have no choice but to agree, because either they just don't want to hear it. That's a big one. They're afraid that this is going to bite them in some way. They're going to be punished in some way. Or they're so in love, and this is a really common one for young couples in particular. They're so in love they want to believe this doesn't really matter. It's not important. But one of the places a lot of times these things change when a child shows up. They change when she's pregnant. They change when life is about to change. So keep in mind, when you make these agreements, when you make these agreements in your courting phase, when you make these agreements in your pre-marriage counseling, if you do the pre-marriage counseling with me, when you make these agreements even as an existing couple, and you're looking over the vows, you're looking over the big issue things, and you're sitting down to kind of renegotiate with where we are now in life, what's our deal going to be? To understand that agreements are good faith starting points. If you have a good faith agreement, that what should always be true is what you agree to, you mean. And you mean it right here, right now, you sincerely mean it. It's not that, well, I'm just going to say what I need to say, and I'm going to be angry and resentful about it. If you're going to be angry and resentful about it, make that part of the thing, like, okay, I don't like it, but I'm willing to agree to this for a season. That would be better than saying, okay, I agree, and then going on and being resentful the whole time. Because if the resentfulness is going to affect the relationship, it's really good if somebody knows it. That's part of this equation. And they can calculate that in. It's like, okay, am I willing to have the resentfulness build up over the season? So say, for instance, if I've decided I'm going to go take this contract, and this contract is going to take me away from my wife for most of an entire season, because I'm going to be traveling for most of the time, and I might get to spend 2 or 3 weeks with her over the next 6 or 8 months. And she's going to be resentful about me being gone. It would be good for me to know that. Because when I come back, if she's been really upset that I'm gone and she's handling all the stuff at home by herself, even though the money is there because that's why I'm taking this job, or it might be part of working my way to the position where the next job up from that job is the job that we as a couple really want me to have. But this is the job I have to do to get the job I want. That if she's pre-agrees, like, okay, I understand that this is part of the deal. And I don't like you being gone so much, but I understand and we agree. But if she's going to be resentful and doesn't tell me, and I'm coming home expecting her to be excited to see me, and instead she's like, it's about time you're home. And she's trying to not be that way, but I didn't know. I couldn't factor that into the decisions. And so these are things to look at. Agreements are not set in stone. You should be making good faith agreements with one another. Obviously, they should be genuine good faith agreements based upon the best available understanding at the time. The best available understanding at the time. There's some things you just don't know. There's some things you'll find out when it's happening. But to the extent you can understand what the deal is, you work from there. Agreement should be kept unless and until there's a good reason to change the agreement. So say, for instance, a simple and objective a thing on a sexual relationship. Suppose the agreement is we will have sex at least 3 times a week. And that's an agreement that the couple made. Well, then that should be the deal unless there's a good reason to change the deal. Now, suppose that's the agreement. What would be some good reasons? Well, some people might say, well, you know, her menstrual cycle week. Some people will say, well, if somebody's sick. Some people will say, well, obviously, if one of them's out of town. For some people, that just needs to be the agreement, darn it. And so these are things that ought to be navigated. And it's like, okay, is this just what you're going to start with? And whatever happens actually happens. And, that's the agreement if I'm in the mood. And if I'm not in the mood, then that's not the agreement. These are things that ought to be known as well as possible up front. Now, can you then get into the sexual relationship and find that, it's really not working. That I thought it would be okay, but it really isn't. And then you renegotiate it. So long as when you made the deal to start with, it was a good faith deal. So we always need to be aware that faithfulness isn't just what someone does or does not do outside the relationship. We have to remember, first and always, it's what each of you does in the relationship. The impact of that is immediate on an every time basis. If I have a conversation with some outside woman and it's just a conversation, maybe the flirting got a bit too far afield and we crossed the line that if my wife was there, she would have a legitimate problem with that. And you go, okay, I need to be careful with this person because we just kind of get this thing going. And I handle it. And we take care of that. And so we don't have that issue anymore. How much does that do damage to my wife if it's just handled, never comes up, and she never knows? She never has to see it. It doesn't. But what if I have a bad interaction with my wife? How does that affect my wife? On an every time basis, because it's with her. She's experiencing it. She's not even just hearing about it later. She might hear about that later. But if it's happening to her, if it's happening with her, that's right here, right now to her on an immediate, every time basis. And so we all need to understand that faithfulness is keeping the vows. Faithfulness is loving. Faithfulness is honoring. Faithfulness is cherishing. Faithfulness is having. Faithfulness is holding. Faithfulness is cleaving. Faithfulness is forsaking. Faithfulness is pulling this all together in the way you interact with your spouse. Yes, it also does still, I'm not saying it doesn't include those other things, but we seem to do this weird backwards thing where now it only includes those other things. No, it mostly includes these things. And why I say mostly includes these things is because those are the things that apply for all relationships. Is in my friendships with everybody. Being a faithful friend means how do I treat my friend? How do I talk about my friend and support and defend my friend? With, an employer, it's like, how well do I keep my deal with my employer? As an employer, how well do I keep my deal with my employees? As a business, how well do I keep my deal with my customers? And so on and so forth. That we get the idea of being a loyal friend, being a loyal customer, being a loyal employee. All of this always includes all this stuff. And so when it's a romance, it doesn't mean that we throw all of that stuff away. It's still there. That's still a big part of being loyal. That's still a big part of being a faithful person to the other person. And it may go because of it, if it's an exclusive relationship, now the exclusivity gets folded into there. But the part of the deal is always the deal. And so we have to make sure that we don't forget that. Now, in the context of making deals, we have to remember that things change. Things change. Now, how many people have noticed from time to time that things change? The arrival of children often alters the deal. And just as there are many things that ought to be discussed before marriage, there's also many things to discuss when children are on the way. Now, part of the beauty of this is depending when you find out about the pregnancy, you'll have 6 or 8 or 9 or 15 months or longer to go over these things. So if you decide you're going to start trying to have children, since you don't know how long the pregnancy will take to manifest, you could have weeks, months, or years to be putting into place all of the pieces of the agreements and the practical things to be ready to be parents. Even if you don't find out about the pregnancy until a few months into it, well, you still have 6 months to get ready. So whenever children are on the way, that prompts discussion because things are going to change. And the key thing to remember, even with that, is when things change, things change. And that should be self-evident, right? When things change, things change. Of course things change because things change. If you change things, change them on purpose. And a lot of times what I've found is that once children show up, there's a sudden greater emphasis on finances. Suddenly living in this kind of neighborhood isn't as okay. Suddenly driving that level of car isn't okay. This is our baby. This is going to be our child's neighborhood. This is going to be where our child goes to school from. And suddenly some things get much more important. Unfortunately, also sometimes what happens is the sexual relationship seems to get much less important commonly to an exhausted new mother. And that's still going to be important typically to the husband. And so these are also things to navigate. Just like it would be inappropriate for the husband to decide, well, I've just decided I'm not going to provide any more money. I know I've been the primary breadwinner of the household. I just decided I'm not in the mood to do that anymore. You take care of it, honey. You do it yourself. I still have the money available to me, but I've decided that I'm going to spend it on other things. I'm going to spend it on our kid. I'm not going to spend it on the bills. I'm not going to spend it on our partnership. I'm just going to spend it as a dad. That would be completely inappropriate. And so if we can start to see principles like that at work, we go, okay, so these are things to think about. These are things to discuss. These are things to navigate. These are agreements to be made. But keeping in mind things will be different. There's usually a couple of years after the birth of the first child that is the toughest time on any marriage. And things will go on for a season because of just the nature of having a newborn in the house. But that should not become the new normal. That should be a season. And the discussion on that should be, okay, so here's where we are right now. And in another 3 months, another 6 months at the kid's first birthday, we will have a new discussion about, okay, now where are things then? And what will that next season look like? And figure that for a couple of years, things are going to be different. For a couple of years, the needs of a newborn and all of the hormonal issues and all of the financial things and all of the relational things and just the sheer exhaustion from the hours to be kept when you're taking care of a newborn is going to create at least a season of a dramatic shift. Now, that season should not become the new permanent normal. It'll be a seasonal normal. And it should be a seasonal normal. It should both be seasonal and should be accepted as normal. The basic idea here is if you change things, change them on purpose. Decide what the change is going to be. Don't let the circumstances just drive the change. You look at the circumstances and you choose the change. Now, the change may end up looking exactly what the circumstances would drive. It may look different. But so long as you're looking at the circumstances and you're making the call, you're deciding, then you have the power, then you're in control, then you're not being storm-tossed, you are deciding. And that if you decide, there's better understanding and figuring, okay, so this is what this part of this deal has to be. And if this is going to be a raw deal, is there a compensate somewhere? You know, it might be that for a couple of years after the baby's born, no family vacations. Because, you know, just the idea of taking the newborn on certain things is just going to be too tough. But you may decide, like, okay, so, but as part of the compensate for the season, let's plan that after the child turns 2, we're going to go do something. That we're going to leave the child with grandma or grandpa, or, you know, with a trusted person for a weekend, and we're going to start getting away together again after the child's 2. But from now until 2, we pre-agree that we both understand and accept that there won't be any vacation. And that there's certain things we pre-agree that, all right, we're going to have some couple time, and we'll do that in the occasional getaway, and maybe we'll try to make it every 6 months or so, twice a year, we're going to try to have a couples getaway, and that might only be just a weekend for a while until the kid's in school or the child gets older. And it's going to start being family vacations now. So when we're going someplace for a week or 2 weeks or whatever the family vacation is, it's going to be with all of us, and that we understand that, and that's going to impact, you know, say you had vacation sex rules, and now, okay, but now there's a baby in the room with you. So obviously that may have to be renegotiated and understood at a different level, and so on and so forth. So if you change things on purpose. Do things different because you decided to make them different. Not because they just ended up that way. And if you let choices in response to circumstances, rather than the circumstances themselves driving and forcing a particular change, then you'll have a much better relationship because you're choosing it. You both choose it. You both understand it. You both decide it, and you decide what you're going to do about it, and you decide what you're going to do with it. You decide if there needs to be a compensate somewhere, to compensate for a season. But here's the basics. Keep your vows. Keep your vows. If you keep your vows even when things change, if when things change you go, okay, but what doesn't change is I said I would love, honor, and cherish. So I'm going to love, honor, and cherish. What doesn't change is I said I would have and hold. I said I would cleave. I said I would forsake. And so when we have all of the season stuff going on, I will have and I will hold. I will forsake and I will cleave. I will seek the better. I will seek the health. I will seek the enrichment. That these things are going to be the vow keepers. And keep your vows even when things change. And your marriage will be for life. That these vows, the divorce, almost never comes because people were keeping their vows. You don't see divorces. Well, darn it, I was sick of this love, honor, and cherish. I was sick of all this having it. That's not what happens. Problems arise when vows are being broken. Problems arise when vows are being ignored. Problems arise when things are going backwards instead of forwards. Even when things go wrong, even when things change, keep to the vows. Always be partners. If you always be partners, you can always be together. It takes some extraordinary circumstances to take a couple that works as partners and tear them apart. Honestly, I will tell you, I've seen those circumstances. I've watched them unfold with my own eyes and not really been able to see a way to navigate it. I've seen that, but it's rare. It's rare. 99 times out of 100, there's vow breaking going on. And the love, honor, cherish, and the forsaking, making other people more important, making other people the primary relationship. And the cleaving, it's not my way, your way, our way, it's my way or the highway. You see that? If you do the partnership, if you keep the vows, then you can keep your marriage, not just your marriage status. And I've seen people, they have a pretty bad relationship, but they just decided to stay married anyway. And it can be pretty toxic, but it's counted as a successful marriage because they don't get divorced. But if you keep the vows, if you keep to love, if you keep to honor, if you keep to cherish, if you keep to leadership, if you keep to having, you keep to holding, you keep to forsaking. And remember, the forsaking is the primary relationship. Keep your marriage primary. Your partnership is primary. Keep to the cleaving. And that you do these things until death. As long as we both shall live, then you will have a good relationship. And that is my hope and my vision for you. Thank you very much.